lot for coming along to the second of our sessions that we're running with Complete Careers. So this one is about Ofsted. We've brought Complete Careers in to talk a little bit about this for you. John Ambrose, Director at Complete Careers, is going to be running this session for us as well. It is going to be recorded, so if you don't want your face on the recording, please just close your camera off, but there will be opportunities, I'm sure, for questions throughout. So without further ado, I'll pass on to John.
Thanks, Alex, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Ofsted Ready Talk. So I'm John Ambrose, Director of Complete Careers, and the session really is about helping you to assess your current CEIAG provision against the requirements set out not only by Ofsted but by the Statutory Guidance from the DfE and what Ofsted's remit is within that. So that's really what I'm going to be talking about. Really, I'm designing the session to talk for no more than 40-45 minutes, kind of thing, and then to allow time for questions at the end. So I think that's kind of like what these webinar series has been built around. But I mean, the session really will cover helping you to identify really what the main requirements are from the statutory duties that Ofsted have got a remit to inspect against. We'll review the guidance from Ofsted in their latest staff handbook to see what kind of things that says around careers, and we'll consider some of the practical steps in feeling more, I guess, more prepared really, in helping you to be able to feel a bit more confident and prepared when that particular call comes, that Ofsted are wanting to see you. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'll put up a bit of a health warning now, but this probably won't be the most kind of like riveting 40-45 minutes of your life, to be honest. And certainly those of you that come along to our training really knows that we tend to try and make things a bit more interactive and such. But the problem here is that there's quite a lot of information to get across. And so that I get it right, I've done quite a lot of copying and pasting, giving you some of the actual references and page numbers that I've got it from. So that might be dry at times, kind of thing. So what I'd encourage would be for you to ask any questions as you go along, and I'll see if I can do my best to come up with the answers really. So please do chip in all the way through, and there will certainly be time at the end for any further questions. I've seen some people mention a bit more of an echo coming up, so just if that's persevering and causing any issues, just do let me know. I think hopefully it should be okay then. Right, so let's get started. So what I just want to do before I go any further is just to ask you a bit more of a question then, really. So I'm talking about here in this question, it's not about how good you think your careers programme is, but it's about how prepared, so how confident and prepared do you think you would be in describing your overall careers provision to an Ofsted inspector. So rating yourself, I'm submitting people, so bear with me. Rating yourself as kind of like red, amber or green. So if you could just have a go at doing that in the chat, that'd be really helpful. So again, reiterating, this isn't you commenting on the quality of your overall careers programme, but how prepared and how confident you think you might feel in doing so. So, wowzers, we're getting lots and lots of ambers there. Yeah, in fact, all ambers there, which is really, really interesting. I think that's quite significant, really. So, I mean, what I might do over this next half an hour or 45 minutes might enable you to feel a little bit more confident. Everyone's always a bit reluctant to go full on green, really, still. They're ready, bring it on, kind of thing. But it might be that I might also create a few more questions than answers. But certainly there should be some practical things that help you to actually get more prepared, really. So that's the aim and what I'm trying to do. Okay, so let's go into to Ofsted in a bit more detail, and we'll just look at a bit more background behind Ofsted and the Education Inspection Framework. So this is it. This is the Education Inspection Framework. It was updated again in July, and it's basically inspectors are using it to make an overall judgment about providers' overall effectiveness.
And they'll do that based on 4 main kind of areas as part of every inspection: leadership and management, quality of education, personal development, and behaviour and attitude. Now, the part I've highlighted in red there is personal development, and that's because essentially that's where careers fits into the education inspection framework around personal development. So that's the main part that careers features within that. So also the type of inspection can look very different. So, and again, this is another change since July, really, but there's always been over the last 5 years or so, there's always been a different type of inspection. So it used to be called grade section 8, and that's where previously, if you were outstanding in your last inspection, you kind of stay outstanding forever and a day. Now that's changed now, and they've changed the terminology of section 8 inspections to ungraded inspections. And that basically means they're going in for a shorter inspection, and they're going in to check to see if you're still at the same kind of level that you were last time that you went in. So these are less frequent, checking that you're still at the same level, shorter inspections. But if there's evidence if there's evidence to suggest that you're operating at a different grade, it will trigger a full inspection. So that inspection won't result in a grade change at all. What it will do is it will result in flagging up that there needs to be a full inspection within the next 1 to 2 years if there's cause for, well, not necessarily cause for concern, cause to believe that there might be a slightly different grade that a full inspection would bring out. The full inspection, which is the graded inspection, previously known as section 5, those are the ones that are more frequent, and those are the ones that are more focused as an inspection tool. Now, what does this mean then, really? So again, all the rules different about how many words you put on a slide here, but again, it's literally copied and pasted directly from the Ofsted reports. But it shows a little bit more about what you can expect, if you are in one of those section 8 inspections, which might, so basically if you sat there in a good organisation or an outstanding organisation, so it goes to show that you'll remain on that kind of level. But
John,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your sound quality is a bit, I don't know if it's just me, it's a bit it sounds a bit disrupted. I don't know if there's anything you can do.
Again, if anybody, so Helen's put that in again, Natalie, that's Joe. Okay, that's what I can do there. Bear with me a second, let's switch that.
Okay. Can you hear me now again through the microphone at all? Yeah, does that sound
that's much
better.
Thank you, John. Yeah.
No, sorry about that. Smashing. So yeah, so this next part again, so it's all the information on one slide here, but it's about, this is what they put in the actual reports now. So, and it's basically saying that under these section 8, which are now these kind of like ungraded inspections, so they're not looking at changing the grade in any way in those inspections. They're just looking at reviewing it to make sure you're at that particular level, and that they'll do those every 4 years or such if you stay at that level. But what they're saying though is if they get some evidence to show that a school or college might be operating at higher or lower grades, then what they'll do is they'll trigger for the next inspection to be that full inspection, which is the graded one. So that will happen in the next year to 2 years. And then as a result of that, you might be upgraded, you might even stay on the same grade in the end, or you might be downgraded. So that's just a little bit more about those 2 different types of inspections that you might expect to encounter and what they mean. Now, also, just overall, in terms of understanding the kind of like remit more, I guess, with the Ofsted Education Inspection Framework, So it's all these 3 I's then. I think we're all quite familiar with these 3 I's by now, but I think it's worth just flagging them up again, because I've taken these really as extracts from the staff handbook in the Education Inspection Framework. But I also think that they blend beautifully well really with career development anyway, to make sure that everything that we do has got a clear intent to embed the implementation, to then make sure that what we're doing has a clear impact that we can evidence. So when we're talking about intent, it's about making sure we know the knowledge and skills that pupils will gain at each stage throughout the school's curriculum. So that's the intent. So looking at that from a careers lens is about, well, what are we trying to do? What are the knowledge, skills and behaviours that we really want learners to be developing? The implementation then is essentially about that taught provision, how the curriculum's developed or adopted by the school, how it's taught, how it's assessed in order to support pupils, and overall the impact then. So what are the outcomes that pupils will achieve at the end of a good quality careers programme? So those 3 I's are ever so important, and they're littered all the way through the Education Inspection Framework, but they're also very, very useful when it comes to trying to put together a good quality careers programme and how we structure that effectively. I think often with career development and careers provision, we often find that there's the temptation to go straight for that middle I, for that implementation, to really start to be able to put on activities, to be able to meet some of the gaps with benchmarks through encounters, through experience of the workplaces, bringing personal guidance really. But what we've got to make sure is that there's a clear intent towards every activity that we're doing. It's underpinned by knowledge, skills and behaviours that we want learners to be developing, and that we've got the opportunity to review everything to make sure it's got a clear impact. Okay, a question for you now then. So what percentage of Ofsted reports that have been published since the 1st of September have had careers featured in the report? So again, you can see the caveat at the bottom that excludes independent schools, it excludes SEND schools, and it excludes training providers. It also excludes anything where it's just like a monitoring report to see how they're going on. But again, put in the chat, if you can, what percentage you would estimate careers featuring within that. Okay, so we've got pretty much between about 80% and 100%. And you're absolutely bang on, is the short version of that, because the answer is 87.63%. But to break that down a bit further, those graded inspections, so well, there have been like 97 kind of Ofsted reports published since the 1st of September. Now, most of these will obviously have been done before the summer, so in June and July, and published now, but they give us a really up-to-date flavour about what kind of things are coming through. So overall, of those 97 kind of inspection reports, 87.63% of those commented into the report on careers. And this isn't just doing like a find and replace for careers, because the problem is that the early career teachers is mentioned quite a lot in Ofsted reports now, because this is the new terminology for newly qualified teachers. So, you know, this 87.63% is where it's commenting on some aspect or another of the careers provision. Most of that is about the Baker Clause, or is about, you know, independence and impartiality. It's also heavily linked with things like destinations, sometimes over overall programmatic comments. But what you'll also see then is that when you look at the actual graded inspections, which are those full inspections, that percentage is that bit higher at 91.67%. So essentially what we're saying then is that the vast majority of Ofsted reports now feature careers. And that's really significant, because in the past, what you'd find is that you know, it would be very hit and miss about whether or not careers is anywhere near the remit of a Ofsted inspector when they're in a school or college. And it would be very rare altogether if that then filtered it through to actually then appear on the inspection report. But now it's very much the vast majority of those kind of inspection reports comment on careers. Okay, so let's look under the bonnet then a bit about what Ofsted is saying about statutory guidance for governing bodies and what that means for us. So here we've got the statutory guidance that was updated recently. It was updated in September, but it's been fairly minimal, to be honest, about what's changed, and I'll go through that in a moment. And we know there's going to be further changes coming out later on this autumn, and new statutory guidance coming out this autumn. So what does it say, the statutory guidance? Well, first of all, it says that Ofsted inspection handbook has been updated. Yep. And that's something that we're going to look at in a moment, to look at the staff handbook that supports the education inspection framework. So it says that the importance of schools understanding that, and it comes under that personal development judgment, which we talked about earlier. It says inspectors will always report where a school falls short of the requirements of the Baker Access legislation, as well as considering how it affects the school's inspection grade. Now, we know that's happening, but it's not just commenting really where a school's falling short. They're commenting in general now on largely around the Baker clause, but around careers provision. Okay, now just in terms of terminology, again from the statutory guidance on page 3, it spells out what are the musts and what are the shoulds. And what we can try and do then is to help you to find out the bits that are stronger than a should, but not quite a must really. Because essentially it's about prioritizing what's in the statutory guidance and looking at what kind of things have Ofsted got on their radar to be able to look at. So the DfE state then that they use the term musts when the person in question is legally required to do something, and should is when the advice sets out that it should be followed unless there's a good reason not to. Okay, so that's deliberately quite vague kind of thing from the shoulds, but the musts, there's nothing clearer than that. You've got to do it, it's a legal requirement. So what I've just done here is I've just kind of like tried to summarize what are the main musts really that you'd find from the statutory guidance. Okay, so on the left-hand column in blue to start with, these are some of the broader parts of career development, and the ones in red on the right, these are specifically around this Baker clause, this access arrangements for making sure that we're providing independent and impartial information about the full range of provision, and we're allowing other providers to come in. So you must publish your careers programme and your career leader details on the website. That's been around now as a requirement for a number of years, so that has to be done. So these are all the things that really would be quite remiss, I guess, nowadays for a careers leader not to have in place. But you know, you might be coming very new into this. You might only have an hour a week to do careers provision. So this is your very basic guide as your starting point to make sure all these things are in place. Make sure that independent careers guidance is provided to all 11 to 18-year-olds. Now that's the change really from the September statutory guidance, because before this year, it used to be from year 8 to year 13. Now it's from year 7 to 13. So obviously things like that, you know, you might have some public documents such as your program or your policy. It might make sense to be able to update that to make sure that the language is about all your learners, 11 to 18. Equally, the information that you've got on your school website within the careers section, making sure that you've got information there that's from year 7 onwards. So that's quite significant. The other part as well is that you must decide on what your DBS requirements are for work experience then, to make sure you've got the right level of safeguarding, I guess, DBS for work experience. You must ensure that learners are clear on the raising participation age. and that colleges are required to hold matrix. The final part there is about reporting duties to their local authorities, such as like intended destinations, schools leaving, learners leaving provision, etc. Then we've got some really clear ones then that's about the access policy. So these are kind of shortened, but we'll come on to these in a bit more detail in a moment. Making sure that you can allow access to the full range of post-16 and post-18 providers. So that this is like independent training providers, colleges, different sixth forms, UTCs, the full range of apprenticeship providers and universities and gap year providers, etc., can come in to speak to your learners, and that you can publish a policy on how these providers know how they can come into your organization and know how they can do that and how they can arrange to do that. You must not do anything to limit pupils from attending some of these visits then. So it's not about, we only really want this group of learners to be able to hear more about apprenticeships or to hear more about college because everybody else is more suitable for other opportunities. Then it's not for us to be able to make that judgment call. It's for us to be able to make sure that we provide the opportunities for all to attend if they want to. Act impartially, no bias towards any route or academic or technical route. So it has to be impartial. And it's about explaining technical routes alongside academic routes. Now, those in short are the vast majority of the musts then. Now, and those parts in red, really, I've just put the full information on this slide. And I'm not going to go through it line for line because it's pretty much as was described in that shorter version a few moments ago. But what I do want to stress on is more about these final two bullet points. And I'm just going to read those two out. Schools and college must act impartially and not show bias towards any routes, be that academic or technical. They should promote a full range of technical options. Schools and colleges must explain technical education routes alongside academic routes and should not attempt to promote HE as a better or more favourable route than FE or apprenticeships. Now, I'm stressing those then because I'm not talking here about a careers leader or a careers guidance practitioner kind of thing must act independently and impartially. Well, that's kind of like a given really, and especially a career development practitioner because it's part of their ethics to the sector that they need to adhere to be a registered professional with the CDI. This is talking about schools and colleges. So the quality of your impartial information about routes and about up-to-date progression pathways is only as good really as your least informed member of staff. So it's about making sure that they've got a better understanding and that they're not just automatically talking about university, that they've got an understanding around degree apprenticeships and around higher apprenticeships, and they've got an understanding around T levels as well as A levels and things. So it's important that we educate them really, because ultimately, if they're talking to an Ofsted inspector, then it might well be that you might fall short of the Baker clause potentially because they're not informed, whether that be deliberate or not really, about having a particular preference about a route or option, or it's just they've not kept up with the changes that have come into force with degree apprenticeships, higher apprenticeships and T levels and such. Okay. I'm going to move away for a moment from the statutory guidance and move straight onto the education inspection framework. And this is the supporting handbook that comes with the education inspection framework that gives you more about the detail of what they're looking at. And again, you know, it was the previous version before it was updated did have a careers section, but before that, this kind of detail never existed before. So again, I've put in here, I won't go into all the detail because this is being recorded and, you know, it is reading out things for you. So which I know is terribly irritating at times, but at least you've got the reference points to see what was talked about and where it fits with the education inspection framework, rather than you having to read through it all word for word and try and dissect that when you know you've got Ofsted coming tomorrow morning. Essentially then, we're talking about schools and colleges expected to provide effective CIEAG. Now, I think that's more kind of like error rather than conspiracy here, because most of us know to that as careers education, careers CEIAG, careers education, information, advice and guidance, or what the DFE tends to refer it to in the statutory guidance is just careers guidance as that umbrella term. So it's a bit confusing that they call it something different altogether, but they're talking about that effectiveness of the CEIAG. And it's also, then it's about, they then go out to set out exactly what it states in the statutory guidance on that Baker clause. So those are the kind of bullet points that I just listed a few minutes ago, kind of thing, are specifically set out in that education inspection handbooks and staff handbook that supports it in paragraph 307. In 308, we're going into more detail, but we're looking at the quality of careers provision and how well it benefits pupils in choosing and deciding on their next steps. So looking at the quality of unbiased careers advice, the implementation of that provider access arrangements, good quality opportunities to engage with the world of work, the school's use of the Gatsby benchmarks. I think that's really significant. So it moves away from, you know, I guess, working with the Gatsby benchmarks to make sure that come what may, you meet in them all and using them effectively to be able to help you to quality assure your provision based on the intent that you set out, using the Gatsby benchmarks to really help cement that implementation and also providing some of the tools with it to be able to check back on some of the impact and using things like Compass Plus, for example, as one of the measures that can support within that, as well as the overall Gatsby score for part of the impact. But it's not the tool. It's more about how you're using it to help quality assure your overall careers provision, the quality of that. So that's quite significant. And the school's published information about its careers provision. So, and I think I'll stress here the importance of that, and we'll reiterate that later on. We know that the way that Ofsted works, you know, and it's been like this for many years, and it can be quite frustrating in that quite often an Ofsted inspector might have a reasonable understanding about the quality of an overall organisation based on the data that they've got beforehand, based on the information that's on the school website, kind of thing. And we know there's so much here about what kind of things we're supposed to publish, really. So we've got to make sure, really, if we wanted to kind of, you know, give ourselves every opportunity here, it's about trying to make sure that we're preempting this and we're making the careers section of our website the best quality. It's clear for anybody to look through to make sure that you can find the access policy, you can find the careers program or the careers policy, that you've got information that's clear to a provider that wants to come in to talk to your learners, to a parent in the right language, to a learner, so that you can see all that part. And, you know, you've got all the information there about who the careers leader is and how to get in touch with them. So it's as detailed and as clear as it possibly can be. So it's about making sure that you're taking every opportunity to make sure your published information on your website and on your destinations kind of thing is clear, it's accessible, and they can find it, because they will be looking for it before they come in and see you. Also, in the staff handbook that supports the education inspection framework, there's some sections there that are purely about this section 8. And so these are the ones that were good and outstanding before, that are part of these ungraded inspections. Both of those paragraphs are pretty much identical, different paragraph numbers, but they're saying pretty much exactly the same thing. And that it's basically saying that inspectors will look at CIEG, and if it's not meeting its requirements, it will state it in the full inspection report. Okay, now again, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. I'll come back onto this in a second, but hopefully this will take me through. Now, what we've got here, hopefully it's come through to our Complete Careers website, and that somebody's going to unmute themselves and shout quite loudly if it hasn't done. But one of the things that we've recently updated is our summary, really, of the statutory guidance. So it came out, it was updated in September, so we've just updated that, and we'll do it again when it changes again in the autumn. And what we've done there mainly is just provide some of the key features of it, but we've also done this kind of like, oh, that's the other one. So yeah, that's kind of like commentary on it, and short, 6 pages, that instead of reading 43 to tell you what's going on. But we've also done like a summary table. Looks like those are both the same. Oh no, sorry, it's this one. So this is like a 2-page summary table, well, 3 pages it looks like it's gone on to. And it basically pulls together anything that is in the statutory guidance that talks about as either a must, a strongly recommend, a required, or an expected to. So where the language is quite clear that it's above what it describes as a should. So we've kind of included all those things, and we've extracted out some of the resources that can help you to work towards that. So that's quite helpful, just to be able to prepare for Ofsted, to know that from the statutory guidance that Ofsted are inspecting on, we know that these are the things that are most strongly worded throughout the documents there, that you can extract, and you can make sure that you kind of adhere into that. So you can access that on the website now, but also also what we've done is we've attached a final column on the end to kind of like rag rate it, so to save you the bother. So if you wanted a version of that, just drop me an email or Alex an email, and we can ping that out, so you can have that just to see where you're up to, really, against like a very straightforward summary against those key parts of the statutory guidance. Okay, now again, in the staff handbook that supports the education inspection framework from Ofsted, it sets out the kind of things that feature as part of those grade descriptors for outstanding, for good, for requires improvement, and for inadequate. So this one particularly is, so again, this falls part of this personal development judgment, but there are a couple really that are pretty prominent around career development, and this is one here around what you're doing for that, and essentially how you're using Gatsby benchmarks, looking at the quality of your careers program, and looking at things like your use of the Baker clause. So that is one of those descriptors for good. So obviously, if you're falling short in any of those areas, it can really impact the judgment for personal development, and ultimately, therefore, the judgment for your overall school or college inspection. Okay, now I'm just going to pause there for a moment again, really. I'm going to ask you this question then. Do you know the intent of your careers program? So coming back to this statement of what careers leaders expect pupils to know by certain points in their lives then. So it might be at the end of Key Stage 3, end of Key Stage 4, end of Key Stage 5. What's the overall intent that you want a learner to be developing in terms of their knowledge, skills, and attitudes from the time they start in year 7 to when they might leave in year 11 or 13? What is the intent that we're trying to do as our careers program? So I think the question I'll ask again is probably going to be more of a rag rating. Would you feel confident explaining to somebody, be it an enterprise advisor, an enterprise coordinator, or an Ofsted inspector, what you feel that your overall intent of your careers program is? So again, if you feel comfortable to do so, just pop into chat there about the moment, how well do you feel prepared to do that? Good question there from somebody there about would it not be best to directly link them to the CDI framework? I'm going to come on to that in a moment, because that's a really good thought. So again, do put in any other comments or questions, or I was probably being a bit mean there, asking you to rag rate that particular question, kind of thing. So so you don't feel like you have to answer that. And probably also, you know, making an assumption that everyone's still there and still, you know, intently listening to what we're talking about here. But I think most probably still are, or I hope so, certainly. Okay, let's unpack that a bit more then, because I'm going to come to that question in a second, because I think it's a really good one. Now, that intent then is essentially about what we want, what careers leaders expect pupils to know by certain points in their lives. So this is more about the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes that we want them to be able to look at. Now, the CDI framework is quite helpful for that. So the CDI framework, for those that you don't know it, was introduced in April 21, and it sets out more about 6 learning areas that you'll see in front of you. And then it breaks it down to more kind of like tangible learning aims and tangible learning outcomes, that kind of sets out the kind of things nationally, really, that, you know, young people, you know, a good careers program might encourage people to develop these knowledge, skills and attitudes by the end of Key Stage 3, by the end of Key Stage 4, and by the end of Key Stage 5. So in many ways, the answer to that question is directing them to the CDI framework would be helpful, but that doesn't meet the needs of that's not guaranteed to meet the needs of every single one of your learner. You know, look, taking into consideration the context of your organization, the difference between your kind of like gifted and talented and your kind of disadvantaged learners, or your learners with special educational needs and disabilities. So I think really what you need to be looking at is the intent. You might be using this, you might be using something like PSHE association, you might be using an amalgamation of both. There might be skills builder that features into that too. There might be something like, you might have come up with your own organic outcomes. You might be using the old CDI framework. It doesn't really matter what you're using, because none of that is statutory. What matters is that you've got a clear intent that meets the needs of your learners, and that you can find some kind of, you know, it's helpful then to be able to take some of these national frameworks and to be able to see if they align with the kind of things that will go alongside your overall intent for what you want to be doing. So essentially, really, your intent starts from understanding just what careers is and what you want careers education to look like, to prepare people best for the futures that they're about to navigate on into an uncertain world where we really don't know what kind of jobs are going to be existing in the next 10 to 15 years. So it's about how do we kind of equip people with the intent to be able to then navigate and explore that and manage those transitions. But how do we then also apply that to the context of our unique features of our school and our learners, but also bringing in the demographics of where we are too and the local area. So I think it's a long-winded answer to say, yes, something like the CDI can be very, very helpful here, but we do have to internalize that to come up with a clear intent. The CDI is also featured within the statutory guidance. Schools and colleges should identify and agree learning outcomes for students taking part in the activities organised under the 8 Gatsby benchmarks. I find that as quite a helpful sentence, to be honest, to be able to look at where things like CDI can feature alongside Gatsby. So Gatsby being more about those structures and those kind of like processes that we can put in place and those kind of like outputs, and more about the CDI as more about the learning that runs through it. So again, they say schools and colleges should identify and agree the learning outcomes for students taking part in the activities organised by the 8 Gatsby benchmark. So it's about making sure that all the activities that go on are deeply directed to the overall intent of what we're hoping to do and what we're trying to do as part of our provision. Now, at this point, I just want to stress then that overall, when you look at things like Gatsby, when you look at things like Compass, when you look at things like the Statutory Guidance, when you look at the Education Inspection Framework, you look at lots of things around career development, there isn't really a great amount of consistency about the language that we use for some of this core documentation around careers. We often see things like career policy and career program almost banded together as being the same thing. But I think what I just wanted to unpack here really is a bit more about, well, what are these things? What do they do? And how can they help you to be able to really gain an evidence base for what it is you're trying to do? Now, first of all, your policy, I think the best way to describe this is if for whatever reason you left your post tomorrow and somebody else had to pick up, it is helping that person to understand what's going on, the walkthrough of your program, and essentially what's the intent, how is it implemented, and how do you actually go about reviewing the impact of the provision and continue improving it. So it's more detailed. It's the kind of thing that a head teacher won't be bothered about because it's way too much detail. Your line manager may or may not be. Your enterprise coordinator may or may not be, sorry, enterprise advisor may or may not have time to go into that level of detail. And it's also things like, you know, certainly your peers, in terms of your colleagues in school or college, learners and parents certainly don't need all that information. So if that is the information that you've got to show your students and parents, you know, what's going on for careers, it's going to be a bit on your website, it's going to be a bit overkill kind of thing. So you might want to think about that. You might then therefore want to introduce some kind of career strategy, which might be a 1-pager or 2-pager, which provides the headlines that your head teacher, your SLT link, you know, your enterprise coordinators, advisors, again, sorry about that, and other members of staff, your colleagues, can clearly see what's going on. Some parents might even be bothered about it too. So it might be about what is the overall intent, you know, what kind of key kind of activities do all learners get to do, and where do we measure again? So what is our Compass kind of result against national average, local average? What is our destination data against local average, national average? That kind of thing that summarizes what you're looking at and the key things that you're looking at developing next. Your program is essentially that implementation. What's been delivered, where and how. It might be part of the school calendar, it might be your school scheme of works. It's showing what's being delivered, those activities, and how that's threaded together. Your access policy, we've discussed this already. It's talking about how providers can access you and your learners, more importantly. And your career development plan is about how you're developing the program, how you're developing your overall careers provision. Your links to the, I think I've brought up a new acronym there, SPD, that should be school development plan essentially. So how does what you do as a careers organization, a careers department, filter through to the overall aims of the school development plan? So looking at what are your key things that you're looking at developing, how are you monitoring, reviewing and evaluating your program, and how does that bring through using the tools like Compass, like Compass Plus, all those kind of things, to be able to really pull out and extract what kind of things do you need to be moving forward, what external factors might also influence that too. And again, this is something that may or may not be helpful to you then, that what we do is mainly part of the quality and career standard process, is that we've got this kind of like policy checklist part that helps you to put together and structure a good quality careers policy. Now, this is something that looks at the key components so that you can make sure that your careers policy essentially covers the intent, the implementation, and the impact and the continuous improvement. So what we've got here then really is a document that just takes these different 11 parts and breaks them down to say these are the things that you should be considering as part of these parts to be able to get a good quality intent. I mean, it might be down the line we can do a whole kind of webinar section on this kind of thing. So if that's something of interest, just let Alex, Debbie, and Natalie know, and we can put those kind of things in place. Or if it's something that you want a copy of, your Lincolnshire folks, I'm sure we can send that out to you as well, free of charge, to get along with. Okay, so just moving on from intent to implementation. So we've touched this already. So this is more about, you know, this is more your careers program. So it's about how do you document, how do you pull together all the strands of your implementation, your gaps before, your curriculum audits, where careers fits in the curriculum, your employer engagement, the careers information on the website, but also any external sources like Growfile, Unifrog, Start Profile, etc. How the personal guidance links in with that, visit speakers, and how you might kind of like turn all that stuff into learner and parent speak so that they know what that means about what they can expect through entitlement statements for year 7, year 8, year 9, etc. And then it's that impact question then. So it's about whether students have learned the things you've taught them. How do you know whether pupils know what you think they know, what the school does when they find out they don't? So again, that's a quotation from the Education Inspection Framework. So how do you know what you're planning to happen has happened as part of the careers program? For information, for guidance, for the education, for the curriculum inputs, for all the strands of it. You can plan it, but how do we know it's happened? When it's happened, how do we know that it did what we wanted it to do? When we know it's happened and it's done what we want, did we get the right kind of outcomes from it? Value, merit, quality, significance, measured against what we expected and what we didn't expect it to say, will we do it again? What changes will we make next time around? Again, the quality in careers standard features in the statutory guidance, page 12, saying that they strongly recommend, Department for Education strongly recommends that schools and colleges work towards the quality in careers standard to kind of like externally validate things like Compass and Compass Plus as part of a national award. And obviously that's something we're very much engaged with at Complete Careers, as we are one of the national licence awarding bodies through our Complete Careers Career Mark brand. I'm just going to finish now, but I'm going to finish really by highlighting some of the key questions really that we know have been asked by Ofsted inspectors over the last academic year. You know, these are actual questions that were asked. So and I've tried to categorize these. Gatsby, so work placements, how you're promoting work skills, what about labour market information, how do you ensure impartiality with one-to-one reviews, that kind of thing, interviews. General, I like this first question. How do students know they have careers education? I think that's a really good question. And it's often something that we find when we do quality and careers standard assessments, that you can ask a student about what they do for careers or what they've done, but they don't necessarily know straight away that what they did was careers. So it's about how do we actually associate that? And so sometimes you see now quite a lot of schools have a brand that's associated to careers. So an identity, a brand, so that visualization that anything they do, there's a logo that appears or something that they know about that. So that's quite interesting. How do you evaluate careers? Where does careers fit in the curriculum? What do you do at Key Stage 3 for careers and why? What did you do in lockdown? But then there's also some questions that we know are going to be more prominent, more and more about access the Baker clause, to make sure that everything is independent and impartial, and that those technical and routes and options are talked about equally alongside more traditional academic routes and options, and that it's clear that people can come in to talk to learners. The summary part then overall, I guess, you know, the metaphor there, this is about getting your ducks in a row, really. So it's about, do you have a policy or program or both on your website? You know, looking at your documentation and being clear what each is doing. Do you have the contact details on? Does it clearly outline your overall intent, implementation and impact of your careers provision? Do you have that access policy? Is it clear? Can you find it? Can an Ofsted inspector find it? Do staff understand all routes and progression pathways? Remembering that the quality of your information is only as good as the least informed member of staff that you've got on routes and options. Are you clear in what you want learners to develop in terms of career knowledge, skills and attitude? What is that overall intent of your careers provision? Where is your career learning taking place? Are you monitoring and reviewing what pupils are learning and evaluating the impact? Are you recording what you need to develop in a career development plan? So those are the kind of things that, you know, you could look at as to try and bring all those ducks in a row, essentially. I did say at the start that I'd come back and ask this question again. I'm not necessarily expecting you to have leaped further in terms of confidence here, because it might have even flagged up things that you didn't know about before. But if I could ask you to be able to, again, think about how you feel about describing your careers provision. Do you feel like you might know more about, after the content of this talk, does it make you feel a bit more prepared about what you want to do next, then about what you need to find out next? So essentially in the chat, it'd be helpful if you could just put a summary about if you feel less prepared, about the same, or more prepared, or whatever you kind of like feeling is right now would be quite helpful. And just as I do that, I just want to finish really by saying that, yes, this is all a bit more about Ofsted, which is more about the sticks that are associated with career development. And I don't really like talking about that in careers in this sense, because careers is far more. And what we can achieve in career development goes far beyond satisfying an Ofsted inspector. You know, there's so many benefits to getting this right for the individual, to the learning organisation, to the community, to feeding business and the employers, as well as to the overall economy. So, you know, there's such a bigger piece for this, for why bother, that's far bigger than what Ofsted say. I'm going to stop sharing there. I'm also going to just check that chat box. Yeah, okay, so questions about where the gaps can be, more prepared, okay, more direction, still worry about Baker clause, now I can imagine completely. So I am going to stop talking there altogether and probably stop recording as well, so that you feel less pressured about asking questions.